This video is dedicated to each one of us who has experienced trauma. And in this hellscape of a matrix, I think that includes every one of us. So let's talk about how to deal with this trauma and move past it. This is going to be a bit of a long video, but I bet it will be worth it, so why don't you give it a chance. I've noticed that there's a pretty sad point of view that's currently taking hold of a lot of us soul beings, from just suffering and wanting to just end it all, to the people who think that there's no way out of the matrix. And there's other people too who think that if there is a creator, then why the hell hasn't he helped us? Maybe this world is just pure suffering, and when you die you're just gonna get reshuffled back into a hellscape.
How I feel. This inside me. I wish I couldn't feel anything, Sammy.
You see a light at the end of this ugly-ass tunnel. I don't.
So now you don't believe anymore.
There's a God.
At this point, Vegas money's on, yeah.
I don't know, guys.
Okay, look, I know you're not all choir boy about this stuff, but this is becoming less and less about faith and more about proof.
People pray to you.
I need some help. Please.
People build churches for you. They fight wars in your name, and you did nothing. If there is a God out there, why would he give a crap about me? I don't matter.
I would like to tell you that I strongly believe that you are not trapped here. We can make it out of here, and I would like to present my argument for it. I already made an escape guide that you can check out in case you're wondering about how to actually leave this place. But I also want to go into the reason why I don't believe in any theory that says that it is impossible for us to leave this place. I want to show you why all the signs are out there that you aren't trapped, that they have no power over you. You can leave anytime you want. And I would like to say that there's no shame in wanting to leave. If you want to leave today, that's fine. It's your choice, and you shouldn't be feeling ashamed of anything. I can tell you, I've felt the same kind of way. I've been reenacting the Vanilla Sky movie, you know, at least a couple of times in the shower. Just screaming, I want to wake up, tech support.
It's a nightmare! She goes with me to a blossom room. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me catch the ball!
Okay, so for the people who have a fear of not being able to leave this place, that maybe we will just be forever in torture here, I want to remind you that there's a channel called Forever Conscious Research Channel. And if you watch a lot of his videos, you'll notice that during the NDE stories, The Matrix makers have no fucking power over you, and they always use trickery and deception. Now, sometimes people manifest bad things for themselves by letting their fear and beliefs control what they're able to be affected by, which is something I've gone through in my escape guide video. So if you wanna question about well, what about this NDE where the guy had a hell-like experience? Well, just watch my guide video and you'll get the point of that I'm trying to tell you. And then after that, if you look at how this world works, it's basically an inversion world. And considering it's an inversion world where everybody around you is fake instead of real, and how you're basically powerless in this world. You can affect some things, but really a car could fucking smash into you tomorrow and there'd be nothing you could do against it. It's even likely that a lot of people have life scripts that are just gonna determine when they die. So in this inversion world, we have no power, basically. Which implies, you know, by the logic of symbolism, that in the real world, we would have all the power. Now, you might be thinking that symbolism doesn't really mean shit, but you gotta realize that this world is full of fucking symbolism. It's basically how the Matrix works. You got fucking politics with fucking double-sided, you know, fucking systems like left-right, you know, because fucking dualism and all that shit. You got fucking the massive amount of fucking art that depicts the fucking soul trap and, you know, all the different symbolisms in that. And you got me overusing the word fucking. And then just look at this fucking clip from the Hook movie, where basically our creator powers are displayed on screen. You know, but it's presented as a joke with kids playing, you know, because they don't want to be too obvious, but they still have to show us everything. I don't really know why, but apparently they feel the need to show everything. Possibly because it's some kind of restriction or something, some cosmic law, possibly, where you have to keep the free will open, or maybe that's just our innate powers that lets us see these things if we look for them. I don't know.
Are you eating that?
No, please.
Eat.
What's the deal? Where's the real food?
If you can't imagine yourself being Peter Pan, you won't be Peter Pan, so eat up.
Eat what? There's nothing here. Gandhi ate more than this.
Don't you remember this used to be your favorite game?
Forget the games. I want some real food. I want steak. I want eggs. I want a cup of coffee.
You can't! Eat your heart out, you crinkled, wrinkled, fat hag!
Oh, Lucio, why don't you just go suck on a dead dog's nose?
You're doing it.
Doing what?
Using your imagination, Peter.
You're playing with us, Peter! You're doing it! Peter, look, you're doing it, see?
And considering this is an inversion world, you also have the fact that lies are being told in the media and the truth is being told in the art, which is a very typical thing to see in this world. And just as we are basically all-powerful beings who always win, you know, and the bad guys, they...
Thing about bad guys, they always lose.
I made a really shitty video talking about the bad lessons of this Matrix, where I basically went through the difference between realistic fantasy and fantasy, where the difference is that realistic fantasy is basically like this shit world, but the actual true fantasy, the thing that actually isn't fantasy, so to speak, or whatever, is actually that we are...
Is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
The truth is that it's called fantasy because we have the power of fantasy, the power of imagination, which is all that's really real, isn't it? Our own creator abilities. Just as we are all powerful in the above, so does the true fantasy show us that we are below. So let's talk about the darkness of this world, about how everything seems so shitty and it's so fucking evil that how could anything that's actually good, any light at all, be real? And I actually believe that this is a sign of their being good, because we're here, I'm here, and as much as I've been hurt by this matrix, I still have a good heart inside of me, as flawed as I have become. Remember that this is an inversion world, and in this inversion world, the world is evil, which tells you everything you should know about the real world. And if you still don't believe in the possibility of a good hereafter, then I want to let you know something. I have no fear of leaving this place, and I do not want to be here. But I'm staying, because I figured it was kind of like my job, you know? I gotta look after you. I gotta look after the people who don't know how to leave this place. Because when it comes down to it, we're all brothers. We're all brothers of the spirit. We're kin. And that's what kin does for each other. They try, and they try and help each other. Now, I'm not perfect, and neither are you. None of us are. I wasted months knowing how to escape this place without doing any kind of work, really, to help my kin. And that's just fucking horrible. I guess I'm just kind of weak, because that's what the world does to us. You want to go home and just fucking make some kind of effort to help your kin, to help your brothers. But when you get home, you have like fucking a couple of hours before you need to sleep again. Otherwise, you're gonna be feeling like shit at work. And it's kind of shameful. I don't like that I wasted that much time. I should have had a fucking 100 videos released. But I'm not strong enough to do that. But at the same time, I think that's okay. Because as I said, none of us are perfect. It's not about fucking doing everything right. It's about trying. It's about trying to be there for your family. And I think this is an important part about releasing trauma. Because when you're hurt, you turn bad. And you need release. And you don't do as good as you should have. But you know what? You're still worthy of love. You're not a bad person because you were hurt. Nobody here is perfect. We've all done mistakes. And I'm not talking about being okay with doing evil. I'm talking about being able to forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made. So you can move on and become a better person. Now, I can't promise that I won't scream tomorrow and freak out and just leave this world, because I won't be able to take it anymore. There's no guarantees here. But for as long as I'm able, I plan to stick around to try and help as many people as I can. Because that's what family does for each other. And I want you to know that if you need someone to talk to, you can talk to me. As long as I have time, I'll be there to talk to you. If you just need to let off some steam, just hear someone that's really listen to you. Anything really, I'd be there for you. And no, I'm not saying that I want you to talk to me. I'm fine, don't worry about me. I'm just here for you in case you need it. Because sometimes we just need someone to listen to our pain. And there's no shame in that.
I had to be. More than just a brother, I had to be a father. And I had to be a mother to keep him safe.
The truth is, watching out for you, it's kind of been my job, you know? I had to look out for you. That's my job. More than that, it's kind of who I am.
It's like I had one job. Had one job. And I screwed it up. And that wasn't fair. I guess that's what I do. I let down the people I love. And I couldn't do it. The only thing we had in this world, the only thing, aside from this car, was each other.
Sam, it's okay. It's okay. I'm here. I'm here. I'm not gonna leave you. I'm not gonna leave you.
I can't do this alone.
I can't do it without you.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Well, I don't want to.
I'll explain
But I can't do it
the infinite.
without my brother. I don't want to do it without my brother.
How
And if he's gone, then I don't.
and beautiful
Couldn't let him die, Bobby.
it truly
I couldn't. He's my brother. And I love you. Cause I can't help it.
Fuck. And now I'm crying. I want to show you a video about the 3 different types of traumas that people suffer. Because I think it's important to understand your pain in order to deal with it. Now this video is a bit long, but it is definitely worth watching. So, you know, let's check this out, okay?
So we got physical trauma, we got emotional trauma, and last but not least, and this is where the real muscle of the conversation is, we have moral trauma. Moral trauma. Now, moral trauma is the one that generally lasts the longest. It's when you've been subjected not to an accident, not to a foible or weakness of your own, but an evil or immoral action from another, right? So the typical example would be a parent who hits you, a parent who puts you down, verbally abuses you, who neglects you, who ignores you, all of these kinds of things. It could happen in school where you're, taught to hate yourself if you're a boy. You're a broken girl. You got to fix that. And so all of this emotional or physical abuse is a moral trauma. And those are the ones that are tough to shake. The moral traumas are the ones that are tough to shake. So you want to differentiate these things. So I'll give you sort of just 3 examples from my own life, not because I want to talk about me, but I think examples can help illustrate the concepts. So as far as physical trauma goes, what would I talk about when I was a kid? So when I was 16, I was jogging through the woods. I leapt off some rocks into what looked like a whole bunch of leaves, but it turned out that under the leaves were very sharp rocks and bent rocks, and I twisted my ankle. This is shortly before I flew to Africa, although fortunately, because I was 16, it resolved in a matter of days as opposed to months when you're in your 50s. No particular trauma. I learned to look before I leapt, right? I mean, and I had been running, cross-country running at this point for years and years, never had any injury like that before, just a bit of bad luck and a bit of lack of caution. Can't do much about the bad luck, but you can do something about the lack of caution, so that's never happened to me again. So didn't leave any lasting trauma, no big upset, no big problems, right? So that's a physical trauma. And there are accidents even that come outside of yourself. An emotional trauma for me was, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I was wandering alone in the woods for whatever reason, God knows what, it was the late 60s, early 70s. So I was 4 or 5 years old, I was wandering in the woods, and a giant Great Dane bounded up to me and was growling at me. And of course, I'm looking up, this thing's the size of a horse to me, at least feels that way. And the dog had me, I basically backed up to get up against a tree, and the dog kind of came up close to me in this like 1/3 of a Cerberus guardian of hell kind of way, and sniffed me. I can still vaguely remember its breath. I think it smelled of rabbit for some reason, which is probably just my panic. And every time I tried to move, the dog would growl at me. And then eventually someone whistled or called the dog, and it just shrugged in a sense and just loped away. So that was emotional trauma. I wasn't physically injured, but I was very, very scared. But this didn't lead to any lasting trauma for me. I love dogs, always appreciated the company of dogs, and I have some caution around, if you're in the middle of nowhere and some dog comes up and is aggressive, yes, you have caution, of course, because you don't know what kind of dog. Could be a wild dog, could be an injured dog, could be a sick dog, could be some Cujo scenario. But it didn't leave me with any particular lasting trauma. Did it teach me some caution? Yeah, I think it was probably a little while before I went wandering in the woods on my own at that age, and I think at that age that should not have been occurring for me anyway, so that's more on my mom than on me. So there's emotional trauma. I learned my lesson. I didn't reproduce the issue. Another emotional trauma, I remember climbing very high up in a tree with some friends when I was probably 7 or 8, and I could neither climb further up nor could I come back down, because it's easier to climb up than it is to climb down. It's like one of those spikes in the rental car parking lots. One way is good, the other way is bad. And I remember, of course, being very upset and crying because I had to cling on to the tree, so eventually you run out of strength and you're just going to fall. So my friends were great. They really helped me. They gave me shoulders to stand on to get down to a place where I could climb down from there. So that was, and did that teach me some caution? Absolutely it did. I did not, I made sure that there's a way back down when you climb up, which is a pretty good lesson. Have an exit strategy for whatever it is you're doing. That's a pretty good lesson. I certainly wish I'd learned that and applied that lesson to some of my dating scenarios. But okay, so we've got physical trauma, emotional trauma, some examples, and of course the moral trauma is, being beaten up by my mother as a child, or being caned in boarding school. So those are moral traumas. And the reason why moral traumas stick around so long is that they're the hardest to shake in your adult life, right? So you can stop doing physically reckless things as an adult, and generally people do. It's always a wild irony that the people who have the most life to lose, longest amount of life to lose, tend to be the least careful in their physical activities. So you can say, look, I'm going to be more careful or give up on sort of crazy things. And then that keeps you safe from a lot of the physical trauma. With regards to emotional trauma, you can, hopefully if you find the person and you settle down, I don't have emotional trauma about being rejected by women because I live with the woman I love. I've been married to for 20 years and we'll spend the rest of our lives together. So there's no real emotional trauma when it comes to that. Hostilities and rejections on the internet has never particularly bothered me too much, except occasionally in clusters. So I don't really deal with much emotional trauma anymore. You can do a lot to sort of deal with that. But moral trauma, I mean, there are always going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, evildoers, immoral people, malefactors in the world. You go to work, there could be some crazy boss or some mean coworker or something like that. So there are going to be these kind of moral injuries. Now, hopefully they're not moral injuries combined with, right? Because if you get moral trauma, you also get emotional trauma and physical trauma for the most part. And I include neglect in physical trauma for children because as a social species, we need our parents. And if we don't get our parents, it's a form of spiritual starvation. It's very destructive. So if your father beats you up, you get the moral trauma of him initiating force against you. You get the physical trauma of the injuries, and you get the emotional trauma of the break in connection and the rejection and the just mess of what you're dealing with. So that's a triple layer cake from hell. Some physical trauma comes with emotional trauma. Emotional trauma on its own doesn't come with any physical trauma. So these are the sort of layers that you have to work with. So it's the most traumatic to have a moral trauma, and it's the toughest to shake when you become an adult. If you have people who did you evil as a child, then it's very hard to shake those habits and those patterns. Now, what is the moral trauma there for? Well, the moral trauma, the upset or the negative feelings associated with moral violence or betrayal against you, is to try and keep you safe. So, physical trauma, be more cautious. Emotional trauma, find a better path. Moral trauma, find better people. Find more moral people. Be surrounded by more moral people. That's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. Maybe it's a little tougher now that society's going, fairly rapidly around the bend. But find better people. That's a tough one to sort out. So, improve or remove, right? The moral trauma is saying if you have immoral people around you who betray you, who spill your secrets, who badmouth you behind your back, who bully you, who verbally abuse you or put you down or whatever, or deny your experience, who gaslight you, just immoral people who are harming your interests for the sake of their own selfish preferences or of their own avoidance of negative stimuli, such as self-honesty for wrongdoing. So, physical trauma, be more careful. Emotional trauma, find a better path. Moral trauma, improve or remove. Improve the people around you, convince them to be better people, or remove them from your environment. I think that's what the moral trauma is saying. And so, of course, with regards to moral trauma, the big propaganda is, well, you can't possibly remove the immoral people from your life because they're whatever, family or whatever. Well, philosophy recognizes that as a category, but not as a moral category. It's a biological category and a historical category and a category of how we evolved as a species to pair bond and to need 20 years to raise our kids or whatever. So family is not a moral category. And of course, people who are bad or immoral within a family want to turn family into a moral category so they can drape themselves in that moral mantle and say that you owe obligations to a concept, not to individuals, in the same way that kings would say, you owe allegiance to God, not to me. You owe allegiance to the country, not to me. You owe allegiance to some collective concept of the people or the right rather than me. So people want to infuse the word family with a morally positive status so that they can say, well, I'm part of your family, therefore I get that penumbra of moral virtue that I've infused the concept with. And it's a fundamental method of gaslighting and social and physical control. So all of that stuff, I think, is really essential to understanding how to overcome this kind of trauma. Physical trauma, we all understand. Be more cautious, be more careful, don't take unnecessary risks. And of course, you have to take some, right? Every time you go and play a sport, you could get injured. But if you don't play any sports or don't do any exercise, you're going to get injured by attrition. You're going to get injured because you're not doing anything. And in the same way, moral trauma is just part of being in society. I mean, even if you were to go live in the woods completely on your own, okay, you may not have moral trauma, but then you have the trauma of isolation and loneliness, and loneliness ages you faster than smoking. I mean, it's really not good for you. We're a social animal. So maybe you could find some kind of community that's going to last, and so all of these are very doubtful and difficult things to try and achieve. So, and of course, the more successful your community is, the more people are going to want to join it, and the more chance you're going to get malefactors coming in. So you just have to kind of grit your teeth, moving your way through the world, and recognize that there's going to be a certain amount of moral trauma that is, again, trying to get you to improve or remove the people from your life. So if people are really destructive towards you, work to improve them if it's a safe thing to do. If you can improve them, then remove them from your life. Again, that's not my order. That's what I think the pain of moral trauma is trying to get you to do, in my opinion, right? Because trauma is there to get us to change our behavior, to remove the stimuli or the potential for the stimuli that causes us the destruction, right? I mean, if you unwisely bike without a helmet and you fall and bang your head, then you're going to bike with a helmet, or maybe you won't bike at all. So the purpose of the pain and the trauma is to get you to change your behavior. How do you overcome the trauma? Well, you listen to what it's trying to tell you. If you're around someone, let's say you've got a cousin who just keeps putting you down or insulting your girlfriend or whatever it is, right? Okay, so you've got, I mean, that's mean, right? That's a moral trauma. It doesn't have to be violent, right? It's a moral trauma. So then you sit down with your cousin and say, hey, like, what's your issue? What's your issue with me? Like, why do you keep putting me down? Oh, I don't keep putting you down. Yeah, you do. Like, I made a couple of notes. Here's what you did. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, you just can't take a joke. Well, it's not funny. You know, like if you're a comedian and nobody's laughing and everyone's getting offended, you just get to yell at them that they can't take a joke. No, maybe you should reevaluate your jokes and try and figure out if they're funny, because nobody's really laughing when you make these jokes, right? Oh, you know, you're just too sensitive. It's like, well, okay, let's say I am too sensitive. Then if you care about me, shouldn't you try and work about that? You know, like if you have a sore back from a sunburn, I'm not going to go up and slap you on the back if I know you have a sore back from a sunburn because I care about you and don't want to upset you and hurt you because you're sensitive in that area, right? Or let's say it's some permanent sensitivity. Let's say you got some hyperacuity or hearing disorder in your left ear. I'm not going to go up and make loud noises in your left ear because it's upsetting for you. So even if I am, quote, sensitive about these issues, why would you keep doing it? Well, I'm just trying to toughen you up. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm trying to toughen you up by saying have some self-control and self-restraint and stop doing things that upset me and stop doing things that insult my girlfriend. Or you can start doing the same thing back to him, and if he gets upset, say, well, wait a minute, you keep doing these things to me. Why would you get upset about me doing them to you? So you'd work to try and improve the person and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And it probably is because they're jealous, or they think your girlfriend's really attractive and they can't get a girl like that, or whatever they could be doing. So you'd work with that and you'd try and improve him. And if he continues to do these negative things, what's your trauma telling you to do? Improve or remove. I think that's what so why is it that trauma continues? I would assume it's because you've not taken on the mantle of improve or remove. And again, I'm not telling you what relationships to have, what relationships not to have. This is my particular framework of working with what worked in my life. I think that there's good philosophical reasons and emotional reasons behind it, but of course it's absolutely your choice what you do with your life. I'm just trying to give you a framework to understand. So why does trauma last? Trauma lasts because the stimuli hasn't gone away. Trauma lasts because the negative stimuli has not gone away. And of course, people who abuse you will always tell you that it's your responsibility to stop feeling negative. Or it's your responsibility that you're too sensitive, that you've got to man up, you've got to toughen up, you've got to have a thicker skin, it's all in fun, blah, blah, blah. So people who are abusing you will always tell you that, yes, there's negative stimuli, but it's not coming from me. That's your craziness that's misinterpreting things to create this negative stimuli. Now, I mean, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, if you do clap your friend on the back and it turns out he's got a sunburn he didn't tell you about and it's covered up by a t-shirt or something and he's like, oh my God, that stings. You'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Gosh, I didn't mean, right, blah, 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 right? I didn't mean to, right? You would feel really bad for inflicting negative stimuli, even if it wasn't your fault. And then you sure as heck wouldn't clap him on the back again, right? Even if it absolutely had nothing to do with you, it was all about him. He didn't tell you. It was completely nothing to do with anything bad you did. You'd still apologize if you're a decent person and not do it again, right? So you wouldn't keep clapping him on the back and just say, stop being such a baby, it's just a sunburn. I mean, I assume you wouldn't, because otherwise you'd be a total jerk, to put it mildly. So if you look at this physical trauma, emotional trauma, and moral trauma, you can get all three, and it can even be self-inflicted. So if you do something terrible, like you drive drunk, and you get into a car crash, and you injure someone, well, you have moral trauma because you did something immoral. You have the physical trauma of the car crash, and you have the emotional trauma of harm to yourself and others, right? So it can all layer. I have seen it occur that if somebody has unresolved moral trauma, then physical trauma can bring it back out, right? So if you had you were physically abused as a child, and you get into a car accident, then sometimes the moral trauma that may be unprocessed is triggered by the physical trauma of the car accident because it reminds your body of injuries and so on, right? So I think these things can occur that way. I think that if you look at the difference between, say, World War II and Vietnam, just to take a very macro level, this is all very general statements, tons of exceptions, right? But if you look at the people who came back from World War II, they had physical trauma, without a doubt. They had emotional trauma. They didn't have as much moral trauma as the Vietnam veterans did, because World War II was generally considered a good war. You were fighting the bad guys, and you did an honorable thing that was dangerous and difficult, and you got ticker tape parades, and you were considered a hero, and you got a pension and a medal, and there were all this sort of positive feedbacks. Now, without getting into the moral complexities of both of these wars, if you look at the Vietnam veterans, they seem to suffer from a lot more PTSD. They seem to suffer from a lot more emotional trauma. They certainly had the physical trauma, and I would say also that they had the moral trauma of being viewed as baby killers and all of this negative view of them when they when they came back. So I think these kinds of issues are ways to understand why it could be the case that moral trauma tends to linger on in your life. Look for the stimuli around you. Are you still in an environment where you're subject to that kind of moral trauma? And then I would say, again, what's worked for me may work for you, is to work at sitting down, having candid and honest conversations, if it's safe, with the people who are causing you moral trauma. And improve or remove seems to be the way that it's worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you too. So it's a great question. I hope that this framework helps you out. And please let me know what you think. I'm always dying to get your feedback on these conjectures. Lots of love. Take care. freedomain.com/donate. Bye.
Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to remove the stimuli without actually exiting this place. But we can, however, be there for each other. Which is why, if you ever need to talk, I'll be there for you. Because a part of releasing this trauma is understanding that you deserve to be loved. And that includes by yourself. Don't allow this matrix to tell you what you are. You're a fucking special person. You're a fucking spirit. You're a fucking light in the fucking darkness. And I want you to remember that they have no fucking power over you. They cannot hold you here. If they had that power, the torture levels of this place would be beyond imagining. They need your consent to come back here. That's why they can only push us so far, because we are the ones who hold all the power. This pain you're experiencing, it will go away, because they can't hold you here.
It has never been like that, ever. I need you to see that. I'm begging you.
I've been the one out there, messed up and scared and alone. And Dean did whatever he could to save you.
Dean, you're all I've got. So of course, I was gonna fight for you because that's what we do.
My plan is to fight. My plan is to try. My plan is to give a damn.
You telling me there's nothing? Huh? You telling me there's nothing to fight for? That there's nothing to hope for? I see light at the end of this tunnel. And if you come with me, I can take you to it. Because you are my brother. And I'm here to take you home. We'll figure it out.
Just like we always do.
We always do. Damn right. Let it go, okay? Let it go, brother.
So what's it all add up to? It's hard to say. But me, I'd say this was a test. For Sam and Dean.
I'm proud of us.
And I think they did all right. Up against good, evil, angels, devils, destiny, and God himself. They made their own choice. They chose family. And, well, isn't that kind of the whole point?